I'm Ellie. I've been in tech for about 10 years. I've always been passionate about just making sure that teams can trust the software that they're shipping, which is kind of changing shape now that teams are using agentic engineering workflows. So one of the projects that I've had going for a while now is auto discovering kind of system design and architecture from software. I've been loading open source projects into Gjalla and just going through all of the documentation that's discovered from those projects, and then pulling in all of the changes from the open source project once a week and analyzing. One of those projects is LiveKit. LiveKit has an open source repository to help developers integrate their tech. They provide a platform for integrating voice agents, real-time voice agents into the software that you're building. So I'll link to this. This is their documentation page. This is their GitHub, which I will also link to, the open source framework for building real-time voice agents. And then I just wanted to show what has changed in the LiveKit Agents open source project in the last week or so. This is marked as medium risk. This happens a lot when I do these open source pulls because my fork of this code has not been updated in a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So the change analysis looks like it's kind of a bigger deal and more risky than it is. But in reality, these changes from the official team are probably getting integrated a lot more frequently. So probably not a real risk. Okay, so this is showing 2 new plugins for text to speech and speech to text. That's STT and TTS, and Keyframe for avatars. Ooh, that's cool. Significantly enhancing the Anthropic and browser plugins to support computer use. That's also really cool. Wow, I feel like they've shipped a lot in the last couple of weeks. Core improvements include a standardized language class and then event loop driven decoder. I always think it's interesting to see what new items are sort of added to the system design versus which ones that maybe were in that, architecture before were modified. So in this set of changes, there's a new kind of entity in the architecture for the Telnyx plugin, and then also Keyframe, which makes sense. And then enhancements to each of these pieces of the architecture as well. New capabilities, enabling agents to interact with the browser. So that's the computer use integration that we talked about, which is pretty cool. Enabling agents to drive Keyframe Labs avatars. I bet that's pretty fun. I'm not building with this right now, but it makes me want to tinker with it over the weekend. Okay, tech stack changes. This looks like this is a new one. It's not just an upgrade. So a new dependency required for that speech to text and text to speech plugin. And then an update to the core library. There are no rule violations. I haven't configured any rules to be checked on this repository just since it's open source. I don't own it. I don't know exactly what they're looking for, but if there were any rule violations, those would show up here. Implicit architecture decisions, I also think are interesting because these are things that show up in the code that might result in trade-offs later. So it's good to just kind of have those flagged. Centralized language normalization improves consistency of language handling. That makes sense. And then inline decoding. Okay, so that's like a performance related thing. It's flagging that it could increase the complexity, but this could be something that we're fine with a little bit of increased complexity because the performance is better too. This flagged a couple of breaking changes. So HTTP server constructor removed a loop parameter. So consumers of that will need to update. And then the Cartesia text-to-speech default model changed. And then it just kind of flags what things need to be updated up and downstream to make sure the integration is smooth with these changes. So cool. This seems like a really positive tranche of changes on the LiveKit agents in the last week. The computer use is really interesting. If you guys are using this, you should let me know. It sounds like it's pretty cool. I'll post this. I will keep pulling in the changes weekly. We can kind of just see how the system has evolved over time. I'll link to the Gjalla documentation as well if you want to click through there, and I'll also post links to LiveKit just in case you guys wanted to check out their project. So thanks for watching. Let me know if there is another open source repository you want to see and I'll get it loaded in. We can talk through it, but otherwise we'll talk soon.